Right. Hello, friends. So, in this video, I want to discuss the end game that rose in the game between Ding Liren and Wang Hao. So, yeah, this game was played in the first round of Candidates Chess Tournament 2020. So first round, Ding Liren is white in this position, and black is Wang Hao. So FIDE rules state that players who come from the same federation, they should play each other during the earlier rounds, so that to remove any suspicion of any foul play. Right. So that's why these two guys are playing in the first round. And yeah, so I think this end game that we are seeing on the board, it's a very peculiar end game in that from the looks of it, if you look at this position for some time, let's say you take 5 minutes just to think on this position, try to think about the ideas of white and black. It might seem that black has some pressure on the d file, like especially the d3 pawn is really, really weak. Black will try to play rook t8, and once he ties down, let's say the white rook, uh, this white rook and the other white rook, once they get tied down to the defense of this d3 pawn, then black can um, start to create new plans on the king side. Like try to increase pressure on white's position. So usually in elite play, so meaning tournaments like candidates, where both the players have rating more than 2700 rating, they're more concerned about their opponents getting a, uh, a position where the opponent has a sort of a pull or pressure on their own position. So what I mean by that is in this position, right, white looks on the defensive because of the d3 pawn. And this is something the players don't like. Like if their opponent has a slight initiative, especially in positional terms, so that is really uncomfortable for them because um, tournaments like candidates, they are not just about playing chess, but they're also a bit psychological in nature. These guys have to play each other through the course of 3 weeks. They meet once with white against the same opponent, and the next time they'll also play the same opponent as black. So you play a couple of games against the same player, and that's why it's the matches take like some sort of a psychological aspect. And so, keeping that particular psychological context in mind will help us in understanding why certain moves are being played by either white or black, right? So, by either of the players. So, as I said before, white's position can start to get very defensive, very passive because of the d3 pawn. And for that reason, Ding Liren, who is white in this position, starts to create some activity in his position. So the queen side is blocked, the center is also blocked. So the only avenue that's left for white is the king side. So it's on the king side where white can create certain, like some activity. So I would recommend you guys to maybe look at this position for about 5 to 10 minutes. Think about both, like plans for both white and black, and maybe then continue looking at the rest of the video. All right, so Ding Liren plays here f4 in this position, And I think this moment was really crucial in the game because black also has to be really alert about any positional tactics or any positional aspects that he might miss out. Right? So f4, here white's idea is to either capture on e5 and then open the f file for the rook, or he wants to play f5, like actually push this pawn to the f5 square, from where it will take away the e6 square as well as the g6 square away from this black knight. So if it taking away the e6 square will mean that black knight cannot reach this powerful d4 square, and if the knight is not able to come to d4, then black's initiative, like his fight for initiative, will be controlled a little bit by white. So white is trying to control this this fight for the d4 square and also the fight for getting initiative, uh, and he's trying to control black's play. So he wants to play f5 and try to control black's knight. So that's the primary reason for playing f4. And now black has to make a decision whether to allow white to play f5 or whether to capture on f4 and create, and allow white a pawn majority in the center. So the game continued ef4, and now, white has few choices here. Like he can take g into f4, and this might allow white to have a pawn center, like a pawn frontier in the center, which can be helpful in creating certain threats against the black's position. So one positional tactic here is that like white is essentially luring black to take the pawn on h4, right? So this is a very obvious question to have. If black can take on h4, or should black take the pawn on h4? But if it does that, there are a few ways white can continue the game. Most notably, white can try to play king to h3, right? And now black has to go back with his knight, and then white can maybe play a move like f5 and knight e5, and then take knight into e5, check, right? And obviously black takes with his bishop, and now white can play bishop to f4, and maybe take rook to g8 and rook to f3. And I think black should have advantage here. He again has a very obvious plan of playing rook d4 and rook d4, right? So black can start putting pressure on white's position here. But white is not forced to play f5 here. What white can try to do is, like just have this particular setup of f4 and e4 pawns and just play rook f3. And I think black is definitely better in this position, but because white has this f4 and e4 pawns, he has some hope of getting counterplay. So say for instance, black plays like knight f8, trying to play knight e6 and knight d4, then I can play f5. And this gives white a chance to create some play on the h5 pawn. The h5 pawn is weak and control some squares in the center. So still black is better, but I think there is a better way for white to continue uh, instead of taking the pawn on h4 immediately. So here a better move would be to play f5, right? The idea being that I'm attacking the e4 pawn, And if white takes e into f5, then I will take knight into h4 check. And now if king g3, then I'll take knight into f5 check. And this does seem better than taking the pawn on h4 directly, right? So black can take the pawn on h4 in a better fashion by first playing f5. So g into f4 is one possibility that white can try, but it doesn't work, or it gives black a better position after black plays f5, which is really a good move. Here white is breaking. Sorry, here black is breaking white's position by playing f5, and if white plays e5, then the h5 pawn is not really weak, and you sort of stop white from playing f5. So here, sorry, black can directly take, I think, h4 check, and if king g3, and now he can maybe go back. And this is again a good position for black. He has an extra pawn. But more importantly, as I said, like the battle in these elite tournaments is also psychological, and what black has achieved here is not only he has taken white's pawn, but he has also achieved to limit white's activity in the center by creating this blockade on f5, e5, and f4. So I want you guys to particularly to pay attention to the happenings in the center, because that's gonna decide who has the upper hand when it comes to activity of the pieces. Right. So let's go back. White did not take g into f4. He takes bishop into f4. And now here, again, he's luring black to try to take the h4 pawn. So say black takes bishop into f4, g into f4, and knight into h4 check. And here white can again play king g3 or king h3, but let's say king g3. And now if black plays knight g6, then what you see here is that the b6 pawn is weak, so white can take knight into b6. So essentially what white is doing is that by playing bishop into f4, he's trying to lure black to take bishop into f4 and go after the h4 pawn, so that black's pawn on b6 becomes weak. So the pawn on b6 is defended by the bishop on c7, right? So this is more of a trick from black to this is a trick from white to try to lure black into taking on f4 with his bishop. But Wang Hao does not falls for it. He does not execution f4. But now we also have to think, like what black can do here. Should he take knight into f4, after which white will get this pawn center, okay? Or should black play bishop d8? Black has to avoid the exchange of this bishop because he wants to protect the b6 square, and play bishop d8 and just continue the game, right? So there are these two options which black has. So let's talk about bishop d8, because in the game black played knight into f4. After bishop d8, there is a possibility that white gains some activity by playing bishop c1. Okay, and now white is planning to play bishop b2 and continue his attack by playing e5. So that's one plan that white has. Also, he can play rook f5 and start attacking the pawn on h5. That's another possibility. So here in this position, white's pieces are gaining some activity by which you can create threat against the black position. Also, if you notice now, black is having a hard time trying to double on the d file, right? So he's not able to double on the d file to attack the d3 pawn. So this is one option. I don't think white is winning here, or I also don't think black is losing here, but it's something which gives white some psychological edge. it gives white a reason to attack black's position. And more importantly, it gives white hope that he can attack black's position. So, as I said, psychological context is important in these tournaments. And keeping that in mind, Wang Hao decided to go with a really really interesting idea, something which we saw in the previous variation. So it takes knight into f4, g into f4. Okay. So white has gotten this pawn center, and if white is allowed to play f5, then his position really starts to look not bad, but maybe even good, right? Um, but here black has a chance to try to um, weaken white's position. So he plays f5. And I think this move is really, really a brilliant move, because after f5, black is highlighting, like he's fixing the weaknesses on f4 and h4. He's fixing these pawns on the square of the black black's dark squared bishop. So this bishop will have a lot of opportunity to attack these two pawns. And also he is attacking, like he's forcing white to commit his pawn structure in the center. And as we'll soon see, that white is forced to give up his his frontier in the center. He's forced to give up this frontier by playing e5. But let's see what happens if white tries to maintain this particular frontier in the center. So a few common moves, like obvious moves, like let's say white plays king f3. So if king f3, then black has a very powerful tactic. Look into d3 check, look into d3, then f into e4, and after everything is said and done, black has an extra pawn, right? So black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and white has 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 pawns. So black has an extra pawn, but black's attack will still continue. Like he plays rook d4, he's attacking even more pawns of white, and he's not in a hurry to take the f4 pawn. So he will bring his king to f6, king to f5, and then uh, like attack white's weaknesses on h4 and f4. So white is bound to lose more material here, and black should black should win this game without a lot of trouble. So the black is winning here already. So let's go back to the moment when black plays f5. So we saw king f3 doesn't work. What are some other things black can do to maintain his pawn on e4? Well, one other thing he can try to do is maybe try to play rook e1, right? The idea being, if I play bishop into f4, then white can go back, rook f1. The bishop is attacked, and if he goes bishop c7, then I can take rook into f5 check. That's one idea. The other idea is that after bishop into f4, I can simply take knight into b6 also. So what would happen if white plays rook e1? Well, I think for starters, uh, black can start increasing the pressure against white's position. One possible move is to play rook e6. And again, if white plays e5, then there is no reason for black to worry about anything. But also, I want to say that black is threatening to take bishop f4 here. Now that he's protecting the pawn on b6. So rook e6, and let's say white plays king f3 here, and I can go rook g6. And if into f5, sorry, if into f5, then I can play rook g4 and attack white's pawn from here. Actually, a better way here would be to first play rook d4. So preventing into f5 completely. And this is sort of a zigzag position for white. See, the white rook cannot go anywhere else. If he goes through a2, then I take on d3. So maybe he will just have to wait rook b3, and now I can play rook g6, and then bring my rook to g4, and keep on improving my position. Right. So keep on improving black's position. And also this particular position is going to transpose to what happened in the game. So after f5, white is going to have a hard time maintaining his pawn on e4. There is another move that white can play here. Let's say white plays rook e1. Black can also play rook d4 here, simply rook d4. The idea being if he plays king f3, then I can take f into e4 check. And d into e4, then we'll just take the white knight. So rook d4 is going to create a lot of pressure in white's position on the fourth rank, right? So this is going to attack the e4 square, f4, as well as the knight on c4, not to mention the pawn on d3. So white's position is under a lot of attack after rook d4. So as I said, it's going to be difficult for white to maintain this particular duo in the center, and that's why white is forced to commit e5, right? Another variation is that, or a good curiosity is that what would happen if white takes on f5. Well, if f5, if ef5, then again while black plays rook d4. Rook d4 is more of aim to just improve the black rook's position than taking on f4. Next, black will play king f6 and then king into f5. So let's say white plays king g3, I play king f6. White waits with, let's say white waits with rook b3, I play king into f5. Let's say he waits with rook f2, I'll play rook e6. He waits again, I play rook g6. Play rook into f4. And now if it takes, I can take with the bishop. And the pawn on b6 is protected by the rook on g6. Right. So what you see here again is that black has initiative. Black is preventing white from improving his position. So again, this the play takes more of a psychological battle than a purely technical one. Although there is a technical battle that needs to be fought here. Anyway, so after f5, white is forced to play e5. Now, I will encourage players here to think on how you would continue as black before again continuing, the rest of the video. Like try to put yourselves in black's shoes and come up with a plan or an idea on how you would like to continue as black yourself. So one plan which looks obvious for black is to play rook d8, but then white can play rook f3, and if rook d4, then maybe I can just play king g3. And white is protecting, like all of his weaknesses. He's protecting f4, he's protecting h4, he's protecting d3, he's protecting his knight on c4. So it seems that black will have a hard time making any progress. Like let's say if he plays king e6, I can just go king h3, and white can just keep on playing king g3, king h3, king g3, king h3, and it will be hard for black to make progress if he decides to double on the d file and attack the d3 pawn. So yeah, I mean, I think this position shows us the difficulty in coming up with a plan for black. The obvious plan of doubling on the d file does not lead to much of an improvement, right? It leads to a more or less deadlocked position. But let's look at what Wang Hao did. And I think Wang Hao's plan was really, really creative. Um, Instead of doubling on the D file and going after the D3 pawn, right, which would be an obvious weakness, he decides to go after the H4 and F4 pawns with his rook. And when we look at Wang Hao's play, it will become evident that the weakness on F4 and H4 is much harder to defend for white than the weakness on D3. So let's see what Wang Hao did. There's rook e6. Very, very creative move. White plays king f3. White is trying to bring his king to protect the d3 pawn. Now he plays rook g6. And white plays knight e3, attacking the black pawn on f5. Plays king e6. Now, I would like to just address some questions here. That could white have played knight e3 before? So let's go back a few moves when black played rook e6. Could white have played knight e3 and attacked the f5 pawn, and thus preventing king e6? The answer is no, because black can still play rook g6, and this is a check. And after white plays king f3, black can play king e6, which would have transposed to what happened in the game, right? So we'd reached the same position that occurred in the game, which means that white could not have prevented black's plan of putting his king on e6 and rook on g6, right? So let's go through the game. King f3, rook g6, knight e3, king e6, rook d1. So now the question becomes how black wants to improve, right? So bishop d8 and white plays rook a2. So here the question is how black should continue the game, because okay, I got the rook on g6, but this rook is not going anywhere on the g file. The d3 pawn is protected. The black king cannot come anywhere near the white pawns, and white is giving up the pawn on h4. But if I take the pawn on h4, then white can play rook h2, and I'll have to take back my bishop, after which the h5 pawn will go, right? And then white in turn is attacking the f5 pawn. So this seems like a end of the road for black. How black is supposed to continue here? Again, maybe spend some time on your own before you take a look at how Wang Hao decided to continue. Okay, so rook a2, and another thing I should mention is that the time control for these games is that each player has 2 hours until the first 40 moves, and this is move number 35. So around after 30 moves, usually or not usually, but players often get into time trouble. So the next few moves are played in a scenario where both white and black had less time. So try to keep that in mind when you're looking at the following moves by both white and black. So why black just continued rook d4? He's not in a hurry to take on h4, mainly because taking the pawn on h4 would require calculation. And because of the practical aspects of the game, um, Black is not taking the pawn on h4. He's just playing a move where he will not have to think a lot. That's why rook d4 was played, because it's a very plain move. It's a very vanilla move, like where not a lot of things are happening and he doesn't have to calculate all the consequences. Another side effect of rook d4 is that now Black is putting pressure on the a4 pawn, right? So it's just increasing the pressure on White's position, and trying to gain time. So yeah, White played knight c2, Black played rook d5, then knight e3, went back to rook d7. So he could have played rook d4, Black could have played rook d4, but then that would have led to repetition and meaning draw. And Black has initiative in this position. So as a practical matter, Black is only trying to survive the time pressure. Usually when you finish the 40 moves, both players will get an additional 1 hour of time for the next 20 moves. So all Black is trying to do here is he's trying to get to that 40 move mark so that he will get additional 20 moves, so that he can start thinking about the different variations in the game. Right. So White plays rook d2 here, and now Black decides to capture on h4. I think Wang Hao got some time to think here on when Ding was thinking, right? When his opponent was thinking, and I think got to. I think he got a chance to look at the calculations that were coming out of here. So let's see what happened. White plays rook g2. A really interesting move here. I think one reason here for rook g2 is that, like, why not rook h2? Well, for rook h2, what Black can do is he can give a check on g3, and if king e2, then I can play g5, and I'm protecting the pawn. Sorry, the bishop on h4. If White takes f into g5, then I take bishop into g5. And again, White does not have time to take on h5. I'm attacking the knight on e3. And if he plays knight c4, now I can maybe take on d3, or I can just play h4 and then try to take on d3. So that's one thing that Black can do. And if knight into b6, then White will take rook into d3 again. But here, Black has a mating attack against the White king. There is a very serious possibility that White's king might get checkmated. Let's see if he plays knight c4. I can play rook d4 again. And if he plays knight into a5, I think play something like g4. Sorry, quickly check. King to f2, and then maybe play a move like rook into e5, probably. And if knight c6, then rook f4 check. So maybe this is getting a bit messy. Let's try to look at an alternative for Black. So I think let's go back a few moves. Bishop into h4, rook h2 is a serious possibility. Let's see what Black can do here. I think he can play the move that Wang Hao played in the game, but for rook g2. So let's look at what happened in the game. So in the game, White played rook g2 and Black played rook g4. So I think the same move could have been played after rook h2. And I think rook g4 is a really powerful move. I think it's a powerful idea than a powerful move. So here, if White takes on g4, I take f into g4. If you place king e4, then rook d4 check. King e3, then I'll play g6. And as you can see here, black is blockading most of white's rooks. And slowly he will go and try to capture white's pawn on f4 and e5. So let's say white plays something like rook c2. So to try to play rook c4, then I can come bishop g3. And if rook c4, then take on f4 with check. King e2, take on e5. Rook into d4, bishop into d4. And already black has a lot of pawns here. King f1, I can just keep on pushing the pawns. Check. Maybe just come king f5. Yeah, white doesn't have a lot of play. All he has is he can just keep on moving his rook, and black can just keep on pushing his pawns. And this pawn is going to eventually become a queen. So I think this position deserves a diagram of its own. So rook g4, a very powerful idea. White plays rook h2 here. Okay, so essentially transposing to that same idea. Black plays g6. White takes knight into g4. I think one valid question to have here is what would happen if white had played something like rook a3 back again and not take the rook on g4. Then black can just keep on increasing the pressure in white's position, and now he's attacking the f4 pawn. So eventually white has to take on g4. So knight into g4, f into g4, comes king e3. Black goes bishop e7. White plays rook c2, and black keeps on rolling his pawns. And around here, Ding actually resigned in this position because he thought his position was hopeless, and I think it is. But let's take a look at few sample variation as to what would happen if white had continued the game. Let's say he plays rook c4. What do you want to play? I think just continue blockading white's pawns with king f5. Plays something like rook e4, maybe rook d5. E6. What can black do here? And maybe g3. If rook h1, then I think I can go. I can really play g2 here. If rook g1, then I can play h3. Yeah, this is looking really bad for white. King f2, then bishop h4, check. And if king e2, then I can just play h2. So black's g and h pawns are really powerful, and black will queen, and now white should get mated pretty soon. So let's go back to the moment when Ding resigned. So h4. Unfortunately for white, it is really difficult for him to stop these pawns. So let's see maybe what would happen if he keeps the rooks in front of the black pawns. So if rook g2, maybe I can king f5. If he plays something like rook h1, black can actually just maintain the status quo on these pawns. Maybe just play rook d4. If he plays rook g1, I can just take rook into f4, right? And protect the g4 pawn. If he tries to exchange, just play g5. If takes, then g into f4 check. And now there are three pawns, which white will have to think about. Something like king e2, I don't know, like just play h3. And if rook h1, we're just taking into e5. Yeah, and white should lose this pretty quickly. Black is just keep on gonna pushing his pawn. You have to, I don't know, like bishop h4 check, king e2, f3 check, king e3, bishop g5 check, king f2, king f4, and I'm gonna play g3, g2. So this is gonna end badly for white. So let's go back to the position when Ding resigned and maybe take a look at it from the top. So yeah, after h4, these pawns on king side, they are really, really strong. And more importantly, white's pawns in the center, they're really weak. Like they're more of a liability and target than anything else. And these pawns are very well blockaded by the black king and black pawn on g6. And for that reason, well, like Ding just resigned because anyway he's going to be lost in a few more moves. So I'm going to just take a look again at this concept. I think Black's play starting from the move f5 was really instructive. So this is our starting position where White had a weakness on the d3 pawn, and so he decided to open up a front on the king side. And as you know, like as students of chess, Wang Hao's play in this position as black was really instructive. Like it helps us understand on how we can implement a similar blockade if our opponent starts to attack our position. So let's say e into f4. If g into f4, then black can play f5 and then take the pawn on h4. Right. So f5 is a critical break recognized in both the positions. And white played bishop into f4, knight into f4, g into f4, and again f5. So a really, like instructive and critical break that we are seeing here. F5 is a really instructive pawn break that we are seeing here. White plays e5. Now black quickly brings his rook to attack the weaknesses on f4 and h4. He gives the pursuit of the weakness on d3 and rather goes for f4 and h4. So very instructive, very creative. I think this is an idea which you really have to imagine. And I think special praise goes to Wang Hao because he played this move and he executed this idea in the heat of an actual tournament game. It's not like he was analyzing at his home with an engine. So king f3, rook g6, knight e3, king e6. And now all black has to do is place his rook on g4. So as I said, these moves were mostly played to in time trouble. And now g2, and he plays rook g4. Double exclamation. Really a fantastic concept. White plays rook h2, just plays g6. And now, yeah, take. This brings back his bishop to e7. Plays h4. Yeah, and those pawns are virtually unstoppable. All right, so I hope you guys learned something very interesting today, especially uh, the idea to give an exchange sacrifice for a positional gain, for a blockade and passed pawns on the king side. So again, I will post a link to the notes. A PDF file which will have the analysis for this position will be posted in the description. So thank you for watching, and be on the alert for the next video.